Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. I can see in the comments that some of you are saying rest in peace, Gonzalo Lira. Yes, may his soul rest in peace, and may the souls of all the journalists who lost their lives in the past year and this year and the years before during the conflicts. There is no excuse at all of targeting the journalists, and nowadays over 100 Palestinian journalists actually were killed in the Gaza Strip in order to deliver the messages and the pictures and the footage for the outside world to see what's happening in the Gaza Strip. You know what happened last week? The International Court of Justice held two sessions. They heard the Israeli team, they heard the South African team representing the Palestinians. However, Netanyahu came yesterday and he said that this is a shameful act in the International Court of Justice, and no one is going to stop us, neither The Hague nor the axis of evil, according to him. Germany jumped the wagon and said that they will intervene in the International Court of Justice case on behalf of Israel, and they blasted the genocide accusations. The ambassador or the deputy permanent observer of the state of Palestine to the UN criticized Germany harshly, but surprisingly, or not surprisingly, in my opinion, Namibian presidency posted a very long statement criticizing Germany's move. So we're going to definitely discuss that. We will see also the history behind these Namibian posts on X. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came in defense of Israel as usual, and also we have seen the UK and the US and Australian sides were bombing Yemen, and US Senator Lindsey Graham came on Fox TV calling for bombing Iran. We're going to discuss all these cases today, and I'm joined by Tarik Cyril Amar. He's a historian from Germany, associate professor of history at Koc University, specialized in Russian, Ukrainian, and East European history. His book is The Paradox of Ukrainian Lviv, a borderland city between Stalinists, Nazis, and nationalists. I will put the link in the description below so that you can purchase it. Tarik, thank you very much for being my guest today to discuss together on this geopolitics or Sunday geopolitics together so we can chat about all these current affairs together.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Great pleasure
It's a,
to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on my channel. Actually, I watched both of the sessions or the hearings at the International Court of Justice, the South African side. I also broadcasted the Israeli side on Syriana Analysis, unlike all the mainstream media outlets, which only broadcasted the Israeli side. But after watching the sessions, the hearings, the judges, the arguments, the defenses, with the current state of affairs under the what we are now, the rules-based order, in what direction do you think the ICJ decision will be headed to? Are we expecting a long process? Are we expecting a decision in the coming weeks, months? And how do you think this decision is going to be?
Look, I can only rely on what I read. And according to what I read and hear and follow on programs like this on YouTube, what South Africa wants in the first place, first of all, is basically a form of an injunction, right? It's called provisional measures, as you know, whereby the court would actually very quickly, and that seems to be possible in a matter of weeks, according to what I read, find that Israel has to be stopped from going on because there's such a high risk that it is actually involved in committing a crime of genocide. And then the process of actually then coming to a final conclusion of all of this, as far as I understand, usually takes years. But again, it seems to me that the main point here is that right now, this case is about the court coming to a quick decision to essentially try to stop what Israel is doing right now, as it were preliminarily, right? That's the so-called provisional measures that South Africa is actually fighting for right now. I cannot tell if they have a chance of succeeding. I, of course, hope, pray that South Africa will prevail, and that this These provisional measures will happen at least on the side of the court, right? Then the execution is still another thing. Then
Yeah.
at least the court will do what it, for instance, did in the case of Myanmar. And as you know, that's a case that, among others, the South Africans have referred to again and again, and quite rightly, they argue that if you did this in the case of Myanmar and the Rohingya, you definitely have to do it here. And they're absolutely right, right? But I think, as you also hinted at, we live in a world in which this court is politicized. We know this. The judges are supposed to be above this politicization. They are supposed, in theory, to stand above their national interests. But we also know that that's not usually the case. And there are certain countries where we have to assume that they will never take South Africa's side. It absolutely doesn't matter how convincing the arguments are. There are other countries where that's more ambiguous, and there are countries where we have, as far as I understand, a reasonable hope that they will see South Africa's point and the judges will vote in effect accordingly. And from what I've read, it's not predictable. It seems to be very close run at this point. That in itself is dysfunctional, right?
Yes.
If we lived in a more normal world, this should be an open and shut case, right? There shouldn't be any problems anymore. This should be very, very clear. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be that predictable as far as I understand.
I mean, Israel also appointed a judge, right, in the team
Yes.
of the judges, and he has sworn that he's going to be impartial in this case.
No, no, no,
this
no.
is this is
That's not
the
going to
first.
happen.
I mean,
No.
that's why I'm agreeing with you that this could be overtly or publicly also politicized, and I'm
Epically
also
politicized.
yeah, I'm also reading some of the statements or let's say comments on social media platforms by people who are, let's say, against the US hegemony in the region, but at the same time, they're saying, don't raise your hopes a lot, even for the Russian and the Chinese judges, because they themselves in these countries are accused of committing genocide in elsewhere, and this could be like a bargaining chip with the United States. Do you think that the Russians and the Chinese would compromise with the Americans on such cases?
I have heard that argument in a slightly different form, I think, but it's similar. It's very similar,
Mm,
and the argument seems to be the way I've heard it, that these powers themselves have an interest in being very sparing
mm,
with ever acknowledging a genocide, because they could be on the side of the accused one day, or they have actually been put on the side of the accused, right?
yeah.
Rightly or wrongly. I don't know.
Mm,
I have no special insider knowledge there. I can only say that I personally think if Russia and China do not um, take the side of the South Africans in this case, I think they would be morally absolutely wrong, no doubt,
mm,
but this happens, and states do morally very wrong things. But also, I think they would be extremely short sighted,
mm,
because whatever sort of advantage they might perceive in that, I do have the confidence to predict that they would be wrong, even
mm.
about that. If they would try to be Machiavellian about this, they would get their accounts wrong. And in
Yes.
the end, they would take a massive hit, especially in the global south. And
Yes.
especially for China and Russia, maintaining a certain trust, also not unconditional, but a certain trust of the global south and in the global south, I think is in their is a priority second to none in the long-term strategic global interest. If I were in their shoes, I would definitely join the South Africans for both reasons: for moral
Mm.
reasons, because it's the right thing to do, but also for strategic reasons. Do I know that they will do that? No idea. No idea at all,
You
unfortunately.
opened my you actually opened my eyes on this case. You're totally right. I mean, these countries are presenting themselves as an alternative, right, for the U.S. Hegemon,
Yeah.
and they will need the public opinion to be on their side. And this was something. If I want to focus on the Syrian case, just to give an example on a micro level, And in Syria, for example, the Russian forces enjoy a good relationship with the people there. Therefore, their operations in Syria is easy. Let's say they're not considered an occupation. I mean, if the Syrian government invited the Russian forces to Syria and they acted in a horrible way, let's say, with the people, like an occupation force, the people will act accordingly. But the reputation of any army, the reputation of any political entity is very important if they are interested in expanding their influence over these countries. And China and Russia, both of them, have a strategic interest in bringing the global south on their side and the BRICS countries together. And this will counter the economic bloc of the G7 and the NATO as a security infrastructure or an architecture, in my opinion. But we have someone like Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I would like to show you what he said yesterday. And this is him. Yesterday, he says, "What a shame," cries Netanyahu in his speech as Israel's war nears the 100-day mark. "No one is going to stop us," he said. "Neither The Hague, not the axis of evil, nobody else," he adds. "The new supporters of Nazis have blamed us of genocide." He also refers to Germany's agreeing to back Israel up The Hague. I would like to play this video and we will comment on it.
No one is going to stop us. Neither The Hague, not the axis of evil, and nobody else. This hypocritical attack in The Hague on the Jewish state that rose from the ashes of the Holocaust. Yesterday, I spoke to Chancellor Scholz and I informed her about the fact that Germany is ready to send a delegation to The Hague, and I thanked him for it in order to refute this heinous accusation. But look at this. The new supporters of Nazis dare to blame us in genocide. Who do they support? Assassins? Rapists? People who behead people? Burn babies? What audacity! What shame! No.
I mean, I would just want to say something first. He had the option after the hearings to come out to his people and say, "We're confident that we are going to win this case. We're confident of the impartiality of the judges, of the people working in this court, etc., etc." But he chose to attack, and he chose to to speak in a populistic way to sell something to his people, right? I was reading today to Kim.com. He's a German also living in, I think, in New Zealand. He says, quote, "The lawyers representing Israel would call that poor client control."
It's right. Yeah, he's right. He's right.
I mean, what was he thinking of attacking, like this attacking approach from the Israeli side? It gives me the impression that they are guilty and they're trying to defend, like they're cornered and they're trying to defend themselves, right? This just gives the impression for the public opinion. If I'm a normal person who doesn't know what's happening in the Gaza Strip and I see this statement from Netanyahu, I would think that this guy is, like, the accusations are accurate, the way he's speaking, like in a very nervous way and bringing the past of the Holocaust in this conversation.
I agree. I think I think many people had that response that you're describing, that if Israel, Netanyahu already are attacking The Hague and are already declaring, so to speak, preemptively declaring that they don't care about what they find there, what the judges will find, it does look as if they're very seriously worried that the case will go against them. Yes. Again, we don't know. Maybe he's just being crazy or paranoid, but maybe that's behind it. Maybe they have inside information that their case is so weak and that the South Africans, they have the facts on their side, but they also, I think, as far as I can tell, I'm not a lawyer or jurist, but they did an incredible job of putting them together and arguing them and presenting them. And maybe the Israelis or the Israeli government does have a sense that they're going to lose this. And I find something else even more striking, although not surprising here, which is another illustration of the incredible sense of impunity and unaccountability that that state has. The Israeli regime has absolutely no fear of nothing. They're basically spitting in the face of the international community as it is, right? They're accusing the UN of being in cahoots with Hamas. They're accusing South Africa of being in cahoots with Hamas. They're telling the ICG, which is, warts and all, an extremely important institution, the highest court of the UN, they're telling the ICG to their face that we don't care what you do right away. This is a regime, frankly, if you measure rogueness, actually existing rogueness, by how regimes behave, the violence they actually practice, and the language they use openly in the world, I think Israel beats everyone,
Yes.
including cases like North Korea, hands down, hands down. There is no other state in the world that I can see that has such an aggressive display of you cannot touch us and we know it. And we will do whatever we want and we will get as criminal as we want because we can. Now, the only other state that can compete, perhaps, would be the United States, obviously, right? But even the United States, what's so fascinating about Israel is this mixture of, look, they have a very powerful army. They're punching far above their weight because their army is basically partly financed by the United States and it's constantly beefed up by the United States, right? Ammunition, backup, to aircraft carrier groups when they need them. But nevertheless, it's a relatively small state. And what is so fascinating about it is this incredible sense of invulnerability, right? They don't seek peace with anybody. They can commit any crime they like. They don't need their neighbors. They can antagonize them for decades and decades and decades, and they can insult absolutely everybody and humiliate everybody, by the way, including the Americans, if they feel like it. It is amazing.
Actually, Ben Gavir, he humiliated only recently Joe Biden. He said, "Do all my respect, we're not a star on the American flag, and we can fight for ourselves." I mean,
he said we don't take orders from the Americans. And to
yeah.
be honest, my response was, well, he's right. For the first time, I'm agreeing with him because it's the Americans who take orders from Israel. That's actually what we are really seeing here. And how to explain this, I have no idea. I haven't got the insider information to do that. But I cannot see how Israel will not end up in a catastrophe. And I say this with no satisfaction because in every catastrophe, there are always a lot of innocent people who will suffer. But that catastrophe will ultimately be brought about by the hubris, the absolute hubris of the Israeli regime. That's the real reason that will be the reason of the downfall, and it will come.
Actually, also, my impression is Israel is feeling that the regional players, state and non-state actors who used to oppose Israel are now emboldened, and there are places like Lebanon that where Israel was able to walk like it's a picnic every day, and now they are deterred from this, and there is an increasing attack offensive, let's say, threat on Israel from players that are shooting. Today they say some of the Iraqi militias they fired on Israel, and today Secretary General of Hezbollah said that they have a credible information that a strategic target or a vital target were hit in Haifa, and the Israelis said that this is just it was an accident. Something happened in the port. So Iraqis are firing, Yemenis are firing, Lebanese are firing. This is just my impression that Israel feels that there is a now credible threat against it, and this act of hysteria that we can see by their spokespersons, by the prime ministers, like the language is different. We haven't seen this language openly in the past. Now they feel that they are under threat. But you mentioned the United States is supporting Israel. We have another country now, Germany, is coming in defense of Israel. Nobody asked Germany to come in defense of Israel, by the way. They just appointed themselves as a third party, and they say they will intervene in the ICJ case on Israel's behalf. The German government sharply rejects allegations before the UN's top court that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza and warned against political instrumentalization of the charge. Government spokesman Stefan Heberstreit says in a statement that Israel was defending itself after the inhumane attacks by Hamas on October the 7th. Now, the spokesperson or the deputy ambassador of representative of Palestine to the UN, he posted this. He says, "When we joined the ICC, Germany intervened against the court, declaring it had jurisdiction to investigate crimes committed in the Palestinian territory. When the General Assembly adopted a resolution requesting an advisory opinion on denial by Israel of the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people, occupation and annexation and discrimination, Germany voted against the resolution. When South Africa brought toward the case against Israel for genocide before the ICJ, Germany declared it will intervene against South Africa. Shielding Israel and fostering its impunity is not compatible with the claim of being a defender, let alone champion of international law. Treating Israeli governments as being above the law has encouraged them to act as outlaws." Now, many people are asking, like, they're seeing what's happening in Germany, the suppression against the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. The other day I was in the, what we say, the U-Bahn, or the underground train, and I saw one of the news on these small screens. It says today there was an Jew-hating demonstration in Berlin. This is the title of the news. And people are called anti-Semites. People are losing their jobs. There is a big campaign against the people who are in support of Palestine. And on an official level, they are asking now people in one federal state to sign on a paper to you recognizing the right of Israel to exist if you want to have a German passport. And now Germany comes at the ICJ in defense of Israel. People are asking me in the comments, what's wrong with Germany? Why are they on the side of Israel unconditionally?
I do not. I don't know the answer. But look, as you know, I'm German, and I grew up there until I was like 21 or something, to be precise. Then in West Germany, which also makes a certain difference in some ways, maybe. And I think one reason that always occurs to me first is basically psychological, and that's no excuse. I'm not saying that in some way this mitigates in my view, enormous guilt that Germany is now heaping on itself by its behavior, by its extremely dishonest and, in my view, disgusting behavior in this question. But it is a psychological mechanism, and you could, if you put it very, very brutally, you could almost say they have been socialized to atone for the genocide that their grandparents, or sometimes even their parents, still took part in, the genocide of the Jews, mostly in Europe, under the Nazis, what that we call the Holocaust or the Shoah. They have been conditioned to atone for that to the last Palestinian. That's really what they're doing. The Palestinians are essentially a sort of sacrifice in a bizarre, cultish act in which Germans prove to themselves that they have now dealt correctly or sufficiently with the burden of guilt and shame and disgrace of being the perpetrator country of the Holocaust by going out of their way to facilitate a genocide and other crimes committed by Israelis against Palestinians. Now, I repeat once again that I don't think that any of this mechanism is in any way forming an excuse for what they're doing. Because, of course, every individual German and Germany as a society has a responsibility to break out of this complex, right? They are also sort of indulging in this behavior. Now, there are other aspects, of course. There are other aspects. One is the habit, and it's getting stronger, of total obedience to the United States. So one way in which Germany as a state practices that obedience, right, is by also being even, well, you can't be more pro-Israel than the USA or more pro-Zionist than the USA, but they're really trying to compete, right? They're going out of their way. And then the other thing is that Germany as well has also quite material interest. Germany is a serious arms manufacturer, and it's selling significant amounts of arms, and these exports have been going up massively recently to Israel, right?
Yes.
And if you have followed the discussion on the decision to finally give Eurofighter planes to Saudi Arabia, which of course is also business for Germany, that as well is being justified through Israel. Because what they're arguing is that, oh, the Saudis are using their airplanes now to stop the missiles that the so-called Houthi Ansar Allah are shooting out of Yemen, trying to get to Israel. So we can now sell the Saudis these planes. So I think there are several motifs here, and they're all extremely wicked, extremely vile. And for me, it's ironic. As a German, I have to tell you, I sort of predict that within 10 to 20 years, and I will still see it, there will be an enormous debate in Germany once again about German guilt. And this time, it's going to be about what they're doing now. They don't know this yet, but it's going to happen. They're going to regret this awfully. This is not going to they are not going to be able to live with this in the long term, because in the long term, this crime of the genocide that the Israelis are committing against the Palestinians will be acknowledged by the whole world. And under that pressure, Germany will not stand alone. They are not capable of doing that. They will have to acknowledge it too. And once they acknowledge it, they will have to come to terms, right? As they love to come to terms with dark pasts, with what they're doing right now. And it will be another terrible burden on them.
Tarik, you know what I was thinking when I read this article, and I thought myself, now Germany joins as a third party in defense of Israel in the International Court of Justice in a bid to prove that Israel hasn't violated the Genocide Convention and is not committing genocide. And I was thinking about it, and I told myself, what if the court decides otherwise, that Israel indeed violated the Genocide Convention? So what's going to be the position of Germany in this regard, right? They're going to be complicit because the countries who, like the United States, which used the veto, and I was interviewing Alfred Desayas, a former UN expert, and he told me these countries will be considered complicit in genocide. Yes. And now Germany is putting itself in a jeopardy, right? In by coming in defense of Israel.
Yes, I would only add one thing. That complicity, even apart from this incredible step they've taken, trying to intervene in the process at the ICJ, that complicity is already there. It's already there. And as you know, the UN 1948 Genocide Convention explicitly lists complicity in genocide. That's a term that's used in the convention. A lot of people don't understand this, but the convention is much broader than many people think. In the preamble, it's clear that states that sign up to it have a duty to prevent genocide. So if you sign up to the convention, as most states have, and all the states we are talking about have, you have no option of just saying, oh, I'm not the perpetrator, but I'm doing nothing. You're already in the wrong because you have a duty. You signed up to a duty to prevent.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's another step where it's even worse, that you are neglecting this duty to prevent. You help in the genocide. You help by delivery of munitions and arms. You help with intelligence. You help by diplomatic cover. You help, as the United States and the Europeans are doing, by deterring other states from intervening. That's exactly what they're doing, right? They're using deterrence, military deterrence against other states so that they can't help the Palestinians. All of these are clear forms of complicity. And complicity is a crime under the convention, apart from the fact that it's morally horrific. So, I think We are now in a world where the whole West is already complicit. That ship has sailed. They are already complicit by the decisions and actions of the last 100 days since this has been going on.
Yes.
Everything now is only about degree, right? And what you're seeing with this German insane intervention at the court is they can't get enough of it. They have to heap another degree of complicity on what they've already done.
Wow.
Let me say one more thing, because I mean, for the two of us, I think it's so obvious, but I think we should say it. The German argument isn't worth that term. They have nothing to stand on. One thing that really also surprises me here is, who are the jurists who are telling the German cabinet that they have a chance? The Ras Segal was absolutely right. He was prophetic a little bit because it was very early when he wrote this in the Jewish Chronicle in October, but he was absolutely right. This has unspooled as a textbook case of genocide. And anybody like the German Minister of the Economy and Vice Chancellor Robert Habeck, who has the temerity, the boldness to go public and say, no, it's not a genocide, betrays, among other things, stunning ignorance. You have to be a total idiot to say something like that now, right? The utmost that if they were motivated to protect Israel at any cost, which they are, the utmost they could do is use very cautious phrasings and say, well, there are doubts, we are not quite sure, and so on. No, they're coming out like just in your face, denying what is by now obvious, and this is not gonna stand. It's ridiculous. So I'm beginning to wonder what is still working in German government. Obviously, the conscience is gone. We've known that for a while, but also the competence seems to be below zero. You have to be incredibly dumb and unprofessional to try to take this position now.
I don't want to insult any German politician. You know,
Oh, I
I'm
do.
Syrian.
I do.
I'm Syrian living in Germany. But the other day I was telling my wife, and my wife is German, and I told her, I said, look, I mean, the ministers here in Germany, and not only in Germany, in Europe nowadays, also in the United States, pick any foreign minister now in Germany, France, the United States, and send them to the Middle East, to the what they call the shitholes, right? This is what they call the Middle
Yeah.
East. Send any of these foreign ministers to Egypt, to Syria, to Lebanon, to Saudi Arabia, to the UAE, and let them sit in one room and do a test of competence about international relations and diplomacy, and you will see a huge difference in competence, a big difference. And this raises the question: who is in charge? Are these people really in charge? You know, it's scary to think about it, because I don't want to think that these people are in charge. You know, I don't want that these people be taking decisions.
Yeah, look, do you remember when it was all fashionable? Now we don't hear this so much anymore, but when it was really fashionable to say that Putin has lost it, Putin lives in another world, Putin has lost contact with reality. No, no, no. I look at Baerbock, I look at Scholz, at Habeck, at Rishi Sunak, at Justin Trudeau, at Blinken. And not only do I see morally abject people, I do in every single case, I also see people who clearly have lost contact with reality. The people who live not in reality, who live in some sort of parallel world, right, up there in their heads, are in the West. They're not in the global South, and they're not in China, and they're not in Russia. They're in the West.
But this is how they portray their enemies or their opponents. And now we have Namibia is coming in, criticizing Germany. To be honest with you, I didn't expect this statement. I was reading it today. I want to read it to the audience. Says Namibia rejects Germany's support of the genocidal intent of the racist Israeli state against innocent civilians in Gaza. On Namibian soil, Germany committed the first genocide of the 20th century in 1904-1908, in which tens of thousands of innocent Namibians died in the most inhumane and brutal conditions. The German government is yet to fully atone for the genocide it committed on Namibian soil. Therefore, in light of Germany's inability to draw lessons from its horrific history, President, his name is Hage Geingob, expresses deep concern with the shocking decision communicated by the government of the Federal Republic of Germany yesterday, 12th January 2024, in which rejected the morally upright indictment brought forward by South Africa before the International Court of Justice that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. Worryingly ignoring the violent death of over 23,000 Palestinians in Gaza and various United Nations reports disturbingly highlighting the internal displacement of 85% of civilians in Gaza amid acute shortages of food and essential services, the German government has chosen to defend in the ICJ the genocidal and gruesome acts of the Israeli government against innocent civilians in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories. Germany cannot morally express commitment to the United Nations Convention Against Genocide, including atonement of the genocide in Namibia, whilst supporting the equivalent of a Holocaust and genocide in Gaza. Various international organizations such as Human Rights Watch have chillingly concluded that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza. President Geingob reiterates his call made on the 31st of December 2023, quote, "No peace-loving human being can ignore the carnage waged against Palestinians in Gaza." In that vein, President Geingob appeals to the German government to reconsider its ultimately decision to intervene as a third party in defense and support of the genocidal acts of Israel before the ICJ. I mean, the statement is very clear. We don't have to explain it a lot, but I mean, do you also agree with the notion that increasing number of African countries, Middle Eastern countries, countries in the global south are emboldened and they are daring to raise their voice, as we say, against the what used to be the masters who were imposing their will on them?
I hope so. I hope so, because first of all, it's a matter of justice. It's time, and not, let me be careful here, because I don't want to, I don't want to give the impression that I think that they're doing this only now. I mean, these countries have raised their voices and resisted and struggled for hundreds of years, right? But I know what you mean. There is a moment now where something is shifting again, right? And I think part of what we are seeing, it's not only that there is this increase in pushing back, it's also that the West is losing the power to repress it. And that's happening on several levels. It's losing absolute power. They don't know this yet, but this is true. They just don't have the same capacity to repress people militarily by interventions and so on. They're losing economic power. This is very, very clear. They're losing narrative power, and it has to do with the way that media are developing, with what we are doing here in a way, right? We are not constrained by some centralized studios like maybe in the 1980s, right? There are a lot of people out there like you and others who can now offer alternative points of view and let other people speak. So there definitely is something happening, and I think it's extremely important because, look, this might sound a little grandiloquent, but I'm a historian. And I understand myself, although I have a regional specialization. And of course, I absolutely don't know everything, right? I'm in many ways very ignorant, as you are when you're specialized. But I ultimately, I see myself as a historian of humanity, right? Not just some part of it. And for humanity, I think it's very important that other parts of it than the West are now gaining more and more in weight. Because if you asked me which of these big blocks that we see still on this planet is in worst shape right now, morally, intellectually, it's the West. It's terrible. It's terrible. The spectacle of the whole West supporting, being complicit in a genocide, in the shamelessness that we are seeing now. This is not, it doesn't come out of nowhere. Understand this, I'm not naive. But there is something incredibly particular revealing now. And to me, it has made it absolutely clear that A, the West is declining, and B, that's a damn good thing. It's time for the West to lose its hegemony. This can't go on. So if other parts of humanity are getting stronger, having more of a voice, more weight, all power to their arm. It can't be worse than now.
I mean, only after the first day of the ICJ hearings, the US and the UK decided to bomb Yemen. I mean, I see that they are trying to flare up the situation in the Middle East. Are they trying to redirect attention from this court to open a new front in the Middle East?
Maybe. Look, I mean, as you mentioned at the beginning of this show, right? There are the usual crazies in the United States, and they're not marginal at all, who are telling us essentially, oh, why Yemen? Why not Iran? Right? Let's go for the center of the thing, right? As they see it. It's all just about Iran. Let's finally have the big one with Iran.
Yeah.
And I think there is a terrible possibility that in this insane clique in Washington, maybe there are people that want to replace an election that they're definitely going to lose, right, with a war. And that war they will also lose, but they don't understand that because Americans usually only understand it once it happens, right? So I don't know. I don't think it's impossible that some people want this war with Iran now. They've wanted it before. Maybe they think this is a good opportunity. One of the aircraft carriers has actually left, but that might be a matter of maintenance. Who knows? Or maybe, let's be honest, they are really so stupid that they think that they can deal with something like Yemen, with a country like Yemen, with a movement like Ansar Allah, by their stupid airstrikes. Whereas every expert in the world could have explained to them that's not going to work anyhow. It's definitely not going to work. These people have been through massive bombing and starvation campaigns, of course, sponsored by the West, carried out, spearheaded by Saudi Arabia. And you know what? They prevailed. They prevailed, not Saudi Arabia and the West. You think you can run like 70 airstrikes or 140 and you're going to cow them? That's not going to happen.
Yeah. This is what Lindsey Graham said in this regard.
But to the Biden administration, when will you realize that nothing's going to change until you tell the Ayatollah, if you keep hitting us, keep going after Israel, we're coming after you. I'm not talking about invading Iran. They're a oil-rich nation. Knock out some of the refineries.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a war that this guy doesn't support?
No. He's completely insane. He's an absolute criminal. He's a hateful person. The more slaughter he gets, the happier he is. But look, I mean, that we know about him and about many like him. The question is, are they going to have their way once again, right? The United States is in the process, I think, of, it's very likely that they're losing the biggest proxy war gamble since the end of the Cold War, which was Ukraine. That was the biggest, right? And it was a terrible stretch, and they've made Russia stronger in every respect, and they're probably losing. And the ripple-on effect on that in Europe and on NATO will last for years, and it will be terrible for them, for the West. You would think that coming out of this, maybe you don't want to start another war. But I don't know if the American leadership has that much rationality left. I really don't know. Seriously, I'm not being polemical, you know.
Actually, that's the same question I'm asking myself, because the arrogance is real and they don't want to give up on their hegemonic status. And there is a real, in my opinion, impression that I get from the United States that they don't want to give up on their unipolarity and the unipolar and the rules-based order that they say. They don't want to share the privileges with the others. And this is very, very dangerous situation. But Tarik, I want to say something. I want to end up this conversation with you. I've been living in Germany since 2015, and I become Germanized a little bit in terms of I don't do compliments. And who am I to make compliments to you? You know, your knowledge and insight is very, very important. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. I think you are an added value, and I really would like to continue hosting you probably at least one time per month, so that we can follow up on these conversations, because for the first time, this live streaming has reached 700 people who are watching it live as we speak. So people were enjoying it. Thank you so much for your time and for the insights that you presented to me and for the audience.
Thank you very much for your invitation and for your extremely kind words. And of course, I'd be honored to, if I were a guest again on your show. Thank you very much.
Inshallah, I would really like to have you more often on my channel and we discuss these hot topics. Guys, his Twitter account or X is in the description below. Also his book, The Paradox of Ukrainian Lviv, a borderland city between Stalinists, Nazis, and nationalists, is also in the description below. You can purchase it from the United States or from Germany. Those are the two links that I am posting. So before you leave, guys, we are around now 600 people watching. I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button so that we can navigate through the algorithm of YouTube. And if you want to support my independent work, you can see the link is scrolling in the screen now, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central European Time. Salam.
Thank you very much.